took me, like I said, it took me 18 years from when I told to be able to call it sexual abuse and that he molested me, to accept those words, to finally understand that that is abuse and really evil and actually a crime. And I was angry about it. My counselor used to say, yes, I can remember her asking me when I was probably 28 or 29, have you ever been angry about this? Even when I told her the first time, I think she was surprised that I didn't know that it was a crime.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor to be here.
And it was an honor, too, in November 2023 to be able to report your story exclusively. You came forward to one of our reporters, Rebecca Hopkins. She did, I thought, just an outstanding job.
Yes, she did.
With your story, yeah. But now you're coming forward with your real name. And at the time that we did the story, you wanted a pseudonym. So why now do you want to come forward and tell the world who you are?
Well, when I really woke up to the abuse, it was me listening to a Bill Cosby survivor, and the power of her testimony was actually what woke me up. And so if it could help anyone to put my name and my face to my story, I want to do that.
Down to talk or give whatever I can. I will say that when I first realized, because it took me a couple of years to realize and look back and realize that he had groomed me, because obviously in the moment you don't think that that's what was going on. And I'm 29 now, and I think it was about 25 when I realized, I was like, oh shit, this is what happened. And I think that was about the time that I caught wind. I think that's when he stepped down, or I heard about one of the more public cases, one of the more public girls, and I would kind of looked back on it and went, oh shit, and started to look back. And I will say that most of our correspondence was via Twitter, and I have gone back, all of the messages are gone. My end are there, he's deleted his end. Same thing with, I don't know if the church helped him cover his tracks on everything, or how he got help. I have tried to find anything. I have my end of things. I have my end of the conversations, but it just says Facebook user, obviously not Facebook because he didn't have Facebook, but Twitter user, or even email. It just says sender. Everything's gone, and I find it thoroughly interesting. I have pictures from the band stuff, but other than that, as far as conversations, I'm not sure if I could find anything there.
It was a bit chaotic, and her parents were stressed. They had multiple children, money was very tight, and mom suffered from significant depression. The little girl was lonely, and a friend invited her to go with her to church. She did. They had a great youth group, and the young pastor who ran it was energetic and warm, and he had a pretty wife. So she left it, and she attended faithfully for months. And the youth pastor was lots of fun, and he taught her all about God. She was hungry to know more. The youth pastor paid attention to her and offered to teach her individually so she could learn more about God. And he would take her and get her a sandwich and listen and answer her questions. It was wonderful. She felt special. She felt like she mattered to the youth pastor, and even more, that she actually mattered to God himself. And then one day it got weird. The youth pastor started talking about how special she was and how he wanted to see more of her. He started touching her. She didn't like it, but she was afraid to say so. Maybe she just misunderstood. Eventually, one day, he drove her home, and on their way down a dirt road, he stopped the car and forced sex on her. She was terrified and in pain. I believe we rightly call that rape. Not a mistake. It's against the law. The girl was 13 years old. She tried to tell her friends from the church. Her friend's mother did tell the senior pastor, but he never spoke to her about it. No one asked her questions, and some lady at the church finally came to see her and sat her down and said she probably should not keep coming to the church because they did not want her to damage the youth pastor's reputation. This is the things early in life where I began to understand cracking whips and turning tables over. Her friend quit talking to her, even at school. She read in the paper years later that the youth pastor had been arrested. You see, she was not the only one. And no one came to speak with her about it when that happened. She never told her story again until she sat across from me years later. You think about it. What if somebody like that who'd never told their story shows up 20 years later and sits in the back row of your church? And you don't know that story, but that's somebody who's there, wounded, and still, miraculously, still hungry for God. She longed for him at 13, and she was terrified years later to walk into a church and seek him again. It took tremendous courage. And what will she hear? Will she hear teaching? What would do if you knew her story? She's afraid to hear what God thinks of her, and yet remains hungry for his love. And will she ever hear truth about sexual abuse from the pulpit or from a Sunday school class? How do you think she would feel if a pastor, meaning all good, or a leader or teacher came and said they wanted to meet with her? She'd be terrified. What were the lessons of the church for this woman? That it's a place of worshiping God, that it's a refuge, that truth is taught and desired, that godliness is sought after and sin is dealt with no matter where it's found, that the church is a safe place for the little ones and all others and seeks to do nothing to hinder them, but longs to feed them, protect them from wolves, even those who sometimes look like sheep, and ensures the lamb their safety? Or have we made our Father's house the den of robbers, which literally means a safe place for those who steal? Have we done that with the church?
Absolutely down to talk or give whatever I can. I will say that when I first realized, because it took me a couple of years to realize and look back and realize that he had groomed me, because obviously in the moment you don't think that that's what was going on. And I'm 29 now, and I think it was about 25 when I realized, when I was like, oh shit, like this is what happened. And I think that was about the time that I caught wind. I think that's when he stepped down, or I heard about one of the more public cases, one of the more public girls, and I kind of looked back on it and went, oh shit, and started to look back. And I will say that most of his or our correspondence was via Twitter, and I have gone back, all of the messages are gone. My end are there, he's deleted his end. Same thing with, I don't know if the church helped him cover his tracks on everything, or how he got help. I have tried to find anything. I have my end of things. I have my end of the conversations, but it just says Facebook user, obviously not Facebook because he didn't have Facebook, but Twitter user, or even email. It just says sender. Everything's gone, and I find it thoroughly interesting. I have pictures from the band stuff, but other than that, as far as conversations, I'm not sure if I could find anything there. Who went public. So the girl's name who went public, she was a freshman my senior year. I graduated 2011, so she would have graduated, I think, 2014. And it was her senior year-ish when they hit the height of their relationship. And I think that's when things kind of exploded. And that's also when the whole FIS case finally went to court and all of that shit finally hit. And I know Highland covered up Signorelli. I know that they did not want, because FIS was in the middle school, and I know that they did not want there to be another case, like, oh, look, we have another child predator in the high school as well. And so I know that Highland covered it up, so I'm sure it wasn't hard for Mike to also cover it up. I think the other thing that I find interesting is I'm sure that if we dug, this is going to get even worse. So the person who was giving me rides, because I couldn't drive to his house at the time for, like, family reasons, his bassist, who was, like, 31 years old, was also in on this, like, was also, like, driving other teenage girls to the house. There were other girls at the house. We were all there. They would drive. I mean, like, in the photo that I have, it's me and another girl, like, she's sitting in my lap. We're in the back of a box truck driving around Chicago, like, sitting on Alex's drum set. Like, it is the most ridiculous thing. And it wouldn't surprise me if she wasn't part of the group or something didn't happen to her as well, because I know that they were also close. But I just find it so interesting because honestly, I think kind of like as a trauma response, blocked him and everything out of my mind, and ended up circling back around later in life and running into one of his branch offs of his church or whatever is over in Chesterton. And in like 2013, 14, they were just coming up, Road to Life. And I started going there before I stopped doing church entirely and was like, oh, hey, and found out that it was part of him and was like, no, this is corrupt. Anything that is backed by this man. And then that's when I originally went on the hunt to try to take him down and try to report things and couldn't find any. It would have just been hearsay. It would have just been my word against him. And who was going to believe me over this, like, pastor man who had all this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, no one would have believed me. The reason why, like, the grooming with him specifically hurt is that he was actually one of those people who, like, identified as someone who, like, I trusted and was going to help me get into college and, like, all this stuff, and then to realize that it was never any of that, and that he was doing it for his own personal gratification. And then that's also another reason that makes me so sick, is that, like, he's out here holding these, like, marriage conferences and, like, all this shit. I'm like, you have no business, because I know that you and your wife were still married when all of this was going on, and the things that you used to say about her, and, like, just no, you know. And then, like, not to mention all of the other stuff, like with minors, like, that's just no. He doesn't need to be where he is, and it's horrible that someone like that can be influencing people, you know. And it almost feels like this epidemic type of thing. I mean, my Facebook or my feed is filled with women, like, mocking the whole Andrew's hate thing. And he just feels very icky like that, you know, like this. He's just as bad. He's just as bad with, you know, the Andrew Tate, who has all of these, like, well, he's horrifically horrible, but he's horrible, you know. He has all these minors and the sexual assault and everything, and, like, you're over here, like, preaching, and you have these people who are following you, literally religiously, and you're just this horrible human being. Like, and he's raising daughters. That is the part that kills me. Like, his daughters have to be probably 14 at this point, and that's disgusting to me, because that's a freshman in high school. That's when you started preying on these girls.
This administration, listen, I'm going to speak this vision now, and I've already been working on it. When I bought our Indiana building, it was a Lutheran church. If you guys have never been there, it's a beautiful limestone building that we've actually refurbed the whole thing. It's got beautiful stained glass windows. But that Lutheran congregation at one point built a whole extension of a school, and my education secularly is in post-secondary education. It's I had a license for 5th through 12th grade education because I love formation. And I didn't know that it was really supposed to be a church planter, not in the education, but I still have that hemisphere of my brain. And so I'm announcing that we are actually making plans to debut a school out of our Indiana location that is going to be a Christian school. And we've been working on that. But I also believe it's going to be a template for Long Island. I believe it's going to be a template for New York City. And I believe that first I planted churches, and now we will begin to plant schools across America.
And so we tell people, see, they said they're sorry and they don't want to do it anymore. You just need to forgive them, and you'll be fine. That's what we do. There is no love or truth in all those responses. There is no love or truth for perpetrators, but there is also no love or truth for victims. You cannot be a young man and go to war and kill people for months or more and come home and just bounce back fine. It doesn't happen. You cannot be a 3-year-old girl who is sexually abused by her father, and then when she's 20, just say, oh, well, that was then and this is now. I forgive him and move on. It doesn't work like that. You cannot be addicted to pornography for 15 years, gorging on lust, hiding it, craving it, lying about it, and promise to stop and have it just be gone. Even if the paper's gone, it's in here. The heart is deceitful above all things. Those words come from the Lord our God. I suspect he knows what he's talking about. He says the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it? None of these things can be true if the scripture is true. There is no quick fix. You can't just have a few words and somebody shows some tears and people say, okay, I forgive you and everything's fine. It isn't like that. They say our hearts are fully unknown. That's what the scripture says. That we are inclined toward deceiving others and ourselves, and that the darnel planted with the wheat means we often cannot tell who is who. And all humans, every one of us, are frail and fragile and finite and easily killed, not just physically, but psychologically killed, morally killed, spiritually killed. To fail to face these truths is, of course, to be deceived ourselves, but to face them is rather overwhelming, isn't it? So we do what all good humans do. We tell ourselves it is different than it really is. We seem to forget that we follow a Lord with nail-scarred hands. I assume many, if not all of you, are involved in some kind of work that means you're caring for other people in some fashion, whether it's in your home or your family or your church or in a job.